Go margat las can cor agus dus bar corn falsha riv an arrogant the cor and reen arval the corla Carrick and the Galway agus scored a the Galway some €30 million available to Galway County Council and €28 million to Galway City Council announced recently up to 2017 to build 608 houses for the county and 518 houses in the city. Certainly there's a welcome allocation, but more is needed, but that's a very welcome start in relation to social housing, and I commend you, Minister, and the Department, and also to the capital assistance scheme, which will be announced, I believe, in the very near future. I welcome this bill, and I think one of the signs of the economic recovery has been the impact on housing. A short number of years ago, 2010, 2011, many people would have thought we'd never need to build a house again. We had an oversupply nationwide, and now we don't have enough housing units. And added to the complexity is the regional imbalance. We continue to have oversupply of houses in certain parts of the country, and ghost estates and that, and other areas there is little demand. This bill has started off as the Planning and Development Bill, and it was since changed to the Urban Regeneration and Housing Bill 2015. This is presumably to reflect the supply-related issues in the Dublin area, which we all acknowledge, and where they are especially acute. However, a Dublin focus would overlook other areas, and indeed a city focus would overlook other areas, because there's places in close proximity to the cities, there's urban areas within our large rural towns as well that we need to look at in relation to housing. In Galway, like other cities, we have a housing supply, particularly in the city. In Galway City in the last decade, there has been an oversupply. There was never an oversupply of housing. The local authorities, officials and councillors didn't facilitate the unnecessary building of houses. However, with the growing population and an increase in jobs, a fall in unemployment, there was an increased demand for housing in Galway. However, as figures from the Department show, the number of new homes built in 2013 was just half that built in 1990, 25 years ago when the country was in a recession. The second issue, which I think is a major factor of the housing shortage in Dublin, is the absence of realistic and workable regional development plans. Over several decades, successive governments have not afforded proper attention to balanced regional development. There's been a lot of talk and there's been a lot of initiatives, but they haven't succeeded. The population and migration trends are indisputable and have been going in the same direction for decades. We have a situation now where 1 in 3 people live in the Dublin and Greater Dublin areas. 1 in 2, 50% of our population live in Leinster. This isn't sustainable. It's not in the best interest of the country at large. Unbalanced growth can have negative effects on these areas and have negative impacts on living standards. These include pressure on housing places, leading to housing shortages, unattainable, unrealistic house prices for home purchase or even for renting. Pressure on infrastructure requiring substantial investment in roads, electricity, water supply, etc. Pressure too in hospitals, schools, recreation areas, and these are evident in places in Dublin and in the high population areas on the east. And this surge in population growth in the east is having negative impact on everyone's living standard. However, there are other areas, whether it be in the west, northwest, southwest, Midlands, where there is capacity to expand substantially, to enhance existing communities, to provide a better quality of life for people in those areas. And whilst there are people who will make remarks about certain parts of the west of Ireland and want to turn them into a theme park or a giant national park or whatever, it's important that we have continued regional development and that there are clear actions and the clear points of responsibilities to achieve this. I think we have an opportunity to secure our economic recovery, to rebuild society on a sustainable and balanced basis. The provisions of the bill, which include the vacant site levy and reform of planning legislation, are a start and represent positive steps in the right direction. Sections 3 to 26 introduce a vacant site levy, which is significant and welcome. At a time of great housing need, it is scandalous that, for example, you have over 60 hectares of land in Dublin lies vacant and unused. And in a personal view, and it's obviously an issue for Dublin elected officials, I think in certain parts of Dublin there needs to be a move upwards in terms of high quality housing in certain areas, which you see in other cities. I realise the creation of a vacant site register is a significant undertaking, and this is apparent from sections 6 to 12 of this bill, which sets out how each local authority should create a register. However, the operational date of January 1, 2019 seems to be quite a distance away, and I know the idea of the bill is to incentivise developers to use the land, that it's that far out that they may not incur the penalties, but that it will encourage them to actually build on the land and provide the housing. But I just have concern that it's a late start date for enforcement might not bring about the change needed now, because we need the housing now. I welcome the provision in section 16 whereby the vacant site levy will not apply in negative equity situations. It would be unfair to impose a levy in cases where the value of the mortgage used to acquire the land ended up through no fault of the buyer exceeding the market value of the land. I also wonder, does the vacant site include a house or upstairs apartments, or is it just a vacant site? Should there be an inventory of available housing subject maybe to investment to get it into a habitable state, or to get it fit for living within our town centres? Many town centres are dying, and at the same time we have housing shortages. I think we need to examine why available units, whether they be upstairs flats above shop fronts, etc., are not being made available. It's time to revitalise our town centres. What incentives are needed? For example, if you talk about parking, many people may choose not to rent or to buy because there is no parking availability. What can be done there in relation to underground or backland car parking? Local authorities will levy a developer for a parking space if they cannot provide them themselves, and then those local authorities may themselves not even provide that parking. So in other issues you have where there is paid for parking in town centres, it can have a negative impact on the town, because you can have overzealous enforcement of these parking charges, and it's a disincentive to people living in centres and disincentive to job creation and retention within the cities. Another positive element of the bill is the abolition of the system of contributions in lieu of social housing obligation, as currently the case in section 96 of the original 2000 Act. And I'm certain that during the first decade of this century, this mechanism was used to fund much more than the housing provision within local authorities. And if the funding provided under that original scheme had been ring-fenced for housing, would have substantially less housing demand and higher levels of home ownership. And I know yourself, Minister Coffey, has stated that if this policy had been in place since 2000, he estimates that there will be additional 15,000 social housing units in Ireland today, which would be a huge addition to the housing stock that we have. The bill also removes the ability, I think rightly so, for developers to build the social element of their requirement in an area away from the main development. Because what was happening was you were having the developers in the more prosperous areas and the better sites, the higher quality housing in those areas, and then pushing their social responsibility to other towns miles away to create a sort of a ghettoisation. And I welcome that would be discontinued. The Development Contributions Initiative under section 29, and again I welcome that initiative, whereby the new development contribution scheme is adopted in the county, and I know that ability was given to the local authorities to reduce the incentive, because a lot of the development contribution schemes that might have been put in place during the Celtic Tiger years are no longer valid, they're no longer reasonable for developers, and where this is reduced, therefore under section 29 a developer will be able to retrospectively change or avail of the reduced development contributions. And what we need, obviously, is where there is planning, where developers are going in to build or to purchase that site, that they will build the houses as quickly as possible and provide the much needed construction jobs within that sector. So I certainly welcome that initiative as well. I think it's to be welcome. The other area relates to, and I've some developers, not many, and small developers who might have been in the game in the past, as it were, who are now trying to fund new developments. And it's not everyone, Minister, that can turn their hand to developing, to becoming a housing developer. It's not everyone that can turn their hand to building 25, 50, 100, 150 houses. There's a risk. You need experience, you need funding, you need finance. And I know under Construction 2020 the Department of Finance set about examining the issues regarding access to debt and equity finance for construction and development. And I know that that report was made in March or April of this year. And there are still issues there in terms of developers who will get a certain amount of the funding from a bank, a certain amount of the equity, but they don't have the balance because they're out of building for a period of time. There are other issues that they just aren't in a position to build. And they might be in a position that they cannot now proceed with their plans. So it's clear that the bill contains many positive measures which will envisage the sensible use of land will increase the number of houses available and remove the effective opt-out clause which has contributed to housing shortage in the past. as I said, I have to qualify that by saying that there is a shortage in certain places because of an absence of sensible, workable, spatial strategy to encourage regional balance. If we continue with a move towards Dublin, towards Leinster, this is going to have even a greater knock-on impact, and we'll never be able to solve the housing shortage in the Dublin and Greater Dublin areas. So I commend the bill. I think there is more to do, but I certainly welcome this bill as important first steps to boost construction and also to provide the much-needed supply of houses.